Welcome to the Onside Podcast, a podcast on innovation-driven entrepreneurship. Join us on this journey as we amplify the power of disruptive ideas. Welcome, everybody, to the Onside Podcast, or I should say, welcome back. The Onside Podcast is a podcast that's focused on inclusive, innovation-driven entrepreneurship here in Canada. This season, we're going to take a deep dive into women's entrepreneurship in Canada, and we're highlighting women entrepreneurs and leaders who are working to make our startup ecosystem more inclusive and driving change. These conversations are being brought to you as part of the Start Now Incubator project, which Onside is leading, and which supports diverse and intersectional women to grow and start businesses here in Canada. I'm your host, Alex McCann, Executive Director at Onside, and this is our first episode of this season. So thank you so much for joining us. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Vicki Saunders, the CEO and founder of Coralus. Vicki Saunders is an entrepreneur, award-winning mentor, advisor to the next generation of changemakers and leaders, and advocating for entrepreneurs as a way of creating positive transformation in the world. Vicki is the founder of #Radical Generosity and Coralus, formerly known as SheEO, a global community of radically generous women supporting women-led ventures and working on the world's to-do list. I love that. Vicki has co-founded and run ventures in Europe, in Toronto, Silicon Valley, and has taken a company public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Vicki has also received numerous awards, I hope I can get through a few of them, for her work at Coralus, including the UBS Global Visionary Award in 2020, the YWCA Women of Distinction Award in 2020, Business Leader Award of the Year in 2019 from the Toronto Regional Board of Trade, 2018 Startup Canada Entrepreneurship Promotion Award, and was selected as a leader for tomorrow by the World Economic Forum in 2021. Wow. Those are a lot of really great awards. Vicki, I'm so glad that you're here to join us, and welcome to our show.
Thank you so much.
Vicki is joining us remotely, and I'm here in the studio. So we're really excited to get the conversation going and kicked off. So I did give folks a little bit of background about you, kind of professionally, and some of your awards and all the great things that you've been able to bring to bear. But why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background about you? Like, where are you from? What are some of your hobbies and interests before we dive into some of the questions around entrepreneurship and business, because we're definitely going to do that.
Great. I grew up outside of Ottawa on a farm. It's called saundersfarm.com if people want to look it up. It's a super creative, bizarre place. And I have 3 brothers. I always feel like when people go to the farm, then they can actually understand what I do, because all the roots kind of started there. I learned how to create a business collectively with community. My family is really creative and really entrepreneurial. And so basically every night at the dinner table would be like, what if we started and we had a strawberry farm and we all worked, all our friends worked there, pick your own strawberries. And then when people started to not pick strawberries anymore and just buy them at the grocery store, my dad's like, how about we have a haunted hayride? And we're like, what? That sounds ridiculous. Who would come to that? And of course, my dad and I are very alike. The more people say that's not possible, the more you're like, that's totally the thing I'm going to be doing. And so it has grown and grown and grown. And now it's literally the top Halloween kind of experience in Canada. It's got the largest collection of hedge mazes and labyrinths. And it was, dreaming at the dinner table and then going and creating things and then seeing if people showed up. And that was my whole childhood was this, there was no failure. It was let's try this. Oh, nobody liked that. Or let's try this. And how does that go? And that seems like maybe that's going to be too much resource that we don't have. And so it was this constant sort of stew of experimentation. At that time, nobody was becoming an entrepreneur in the realm of people that I knew. It wasn't a cool thing. It was what you did if you couldn't get a job, basically, back then. And there was very much a path of what you needed to take. And so I never really thought of entrepreneurship as me, really. My parents didn't talk about the business that we had, even really in business terms. It was like this more creative act. And so I feel like that's kind of how I feel about all of my works, kind of like as a business artist. I
Mm.
love getting super creative to solve challenges, and the more constraints, the better.
Mm.
Not every day, but I like the challenge of like figuring all of that out. But I sort of backdoored my way into being an entrepreneur because I was in Prague when the wall fell down, and I was in like an incredible environment where like the tanks drove away and
Mm.
everybody changed their mind overnight. Like, I'm free. Who am I going to
Mm.
be? And it was wild. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm free too. What am I going to do? And so I just started a bunch of businesses and then got all my friends to do that. And I've been like very much on this path my whole life to work. Like, how do you create the conditions
Mm.
for people to feel free,
Mm.
be who they're meant to be?
Oh, that's interesting. So I love this idea of like feeling free through business. And actually, it's interesting when you even said about the artist aspect. I was at an event and a well-known entrepreneur. He's from Kentucky. He said, "Entrepreneurship is my art.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
this is how I kind of express myself." And I love this idea of creating freedom or finding a way of creating freedom. Kind of as you were saying, and that's such an interesting moment in time of like political change and unrest. And of course, we just went through a big change now with COVID and kind of coming out on the other side. And it sounds like you were very excited and energized at that time. Like, what was it? What was it then about kind of business and entrepreneurship that really excited you? Like, why did you get excited about that? And it seems through what you're doing with Coralus and other things that it's kind of involved to thinking about what businesses can do well, or how they can help, or how they can change the world, or be a force for good. So, two-part question is like, what was it about business and entrepreneurship? It sounds like something happened kind of at that time when you were in Prague.
Yeah, well, I went over there to teach English, is how it started. And then, with the liberation that was going on all around, I mean, I just kind of looked around. I'm like, there were no nice clothes. There were like a whole bunch. There were no like English language schools. There were no this, no that. Like, it was just kind of a smorgasbord of like, I've seen the future. I've been to Paris. Prague is going to be like Paris in 10 years. Pick a business, any business, like pick a thing and go. And so that's kind of how it started. And I experimented and I started an English language school. And then I started the clothing store, which I had no right to do because I never even worked in a clothing store. No idea what I was doing. But I just, started these things, and then just like, I could just feel I'm like a catalyst for getting people to do impossible things. It's been going on my whole life. I just get like super excited, and then I energize other people to do the same thing. So that was part of it. There's something so amazing about having a dream for something and like making it possible. And then what? Right. So I did this English language thing, and I'm like, what else could I do? And
Mm.
so I'm kind of in this upward spiral. I have been for the last 40 years of like upping my game. Right. Like, I do something and I'm like, I'm not really achievement oriented. It's more about like, I just love the process of creating. And like, it's very high stakes for me with the work that we're doing now with Coralus, and it always has been, because I just don't understand why we have this extractive mentality. It never made
Mhm.
sense to me that you extract and then you give back a bit.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I just really think that business for me is like the freest structure to go forth and create your magic.
Mm.
I love that. I love the challenge of like finding a model that like brings others as customers, and to like figure out the sustainability of that. And like, and then for everything that we're doing right now, it's like valuing different things. We're valuing impact over profit. We're valuing healing the planet over extracting
Mhm.
just to make money. And it's literally like opposite land to the narrative of the world. It's so freaking challenging, and it's gotten harder over the last 9 years from where we started. I feel like we've just like put a word in front of a word for everything. We're so out of balance. Impact investing, social entrepreneurship, responsible leader. Like, oh my God, people stop. Like, let's just lead well. Let's invest well. And so I feel like we're just super out of balance, and we need massive transformation. And my work has always really been around behavior change, inspiring people to do things differently.
I love that. I love that. So maybe for some of our listeners who are hearing about Coralus for the first time, maybe do you want to give just like a high level? I don't know. I feel like high level seems so cheap or something. Like there's so much that's going on there. But just to set a little context, because you've touched on something which is kind of that motivation that is trying to move away to a different system. So moving from this extractive, exploitive, kind of system that we all find ourselves in, in a capitalist society here in Canada. And we're going to talk about radical generosity a little bit later, because I just love that. I was like, man, I wish I had done that as a hashtag. That sounds so great. But maybe just for the listeners to bring them up to speed, give us a little like overview of Coralus.
Sure. So we're a global community of women and non-binary folk who are really just believe that you can do things better. There is a different way to do business, and there's a different way to do humans. What if we just showed up radically generously with each other and supported each other's dreams? What if that's the only thing to protect our dreams and the dreamers, and encourage people to bring forth their dreams? And so it's a whole new kind of reorganizing of resources that are already out there. So part of the thing was, if you, everyone knows the stats, I hate talking about the stats anymore, but it's challenging to get support in the world if you're not looking a certain way, with a certain charisma in a stereotype of what success is. And so if you're not that, which the vast majority of the planet is not, how do you get your ideas to scale, and how do you grow them and get them out in the world? And so we started with a simple invitation to people. It's what if we each just put a small amount of money per month into a pot, and we aggregated that up, and once a year we opened up applications for people that had really cool ideas for solving global challenges we're facing, and to do it in a new way that was more equitable and kinder and healing, etc. But very broad definition, up to you to tell us how you're making a better world with your business. And so entrepreneurs applied, and we provided 0% interest loans, and then access to the whole community of people that contribute their capital. And it's not just financial capital, it's our influence, our expertise, our advice, etc. And so as an entrepreneur, you kind of walk into this whole new world where people say, I love what you're doing. It's amazing. How can I help? Versus, tell me how you're going to make me a 10x on that, and and you need to have more skin in the game, sister. We're kind of opposite land. We're we love this, and how might we support this, because this has a benefit to all. That's the vibe of the community. And we have now got about $19 million circulating. We've funded 190 different businesses and helped thousands of others. And basically the 7,000 plus women who have contributed some form of capital to this community all feel like we're part of building a regenerative economy. That money loaned out, paid back, loaned forward again. And it just keeps expanding all of us and expanding the possibilities. When you bring your small dream into this room, and then all these other people start to add what they have in abundance, to ease the journey, you start to feel what else could I do? Could this be bigger? Am I dreaming big enough? And it's kind of an intoxicating environment to be in, because it's so opposite to most other places where you're pitch a competition, stand up on stage, and and all these things. They're just the power dynamic is so nasty. And the critical kind of approach that people take, saying the same kinds of things over and over again to you, how's that going to scale, blah, blah, blah. It just is for me anyway, super deflating. I want to be in a place where I'm being uplifted and not picked at, where I'm being encouraged and supported in my dream without someone judging me all the time. I just feel we're in a time where there's a certain way of doing things and a narrative of what is success that is just not achievable and not interesting. And it's actually harmful to a lot of us. It is really wildly diverse range of what is success for people. Sorry, I did super long answer there, but we have an ecosystem-based approach to supporting entrepreneurs, and the more diverse the ecosystem, the healthier it is.
Yeah.
That's from nature.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So I think we just before the show started, we were talking about a little bit about access to capital for women, and Coralus is formerly known as CEO was is focused on women and creating that supportive environment for women entrepreneurs in particular and non-binary to really explore how they can bring their ideas into the world in a supportive kind of community. And this is a while ago. I was speaking with a professor over at MIT, Sherry Schlossberg. She does a lot of research on investment and talks a lot about investment bias. So if you show up at the bank and you look like Mark Zuckerberg, they ask you certain kinds of questions, and you're dressed a certain way. You got your hoodie and your jeans or whatever. Just by the way you look and things like that, and how you answer certain questions that you're predisposed to be able to answer, you're much more likely to kind of get that investment and to be successful if you have the networks or you went to the right school or these kinds of things. And there are folks who have been I don't know, I would say groomed, but positioned to be able to do that. But you're right, a lot of folks have not, and I'm really excited. And this is one of the reasons I was so excited to be able to talk to you today. Is folks are really trying to examine what does that look like, who's being excluded, what are other models that we can really kind of think about that can help different kinds of people who approach the world in different ways thrive, because it doesn't actually help us if we have a lot, especially if we have half the population with great ideas and businesses and things that they could be doing, and they can't actually bring them into fruition. We're all worse off by folks not being able to do that. So I'm really interested in kind of this idea that you've brought forward with the radical generosity. How did you come up with this idea of radical generosity? Like, where does that? I heard a little bit of what you're just saying, but it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so part of the thing that like I've been exploring, like, what is it? Again, the earlier thing I mentioned about what does it take to create an environment for you to thrive? What does Alex need to thrive?
Mhm.
What does Vicki need to thrive? And I was kind of looking at, like, what are those attributes? And one of the things that I've watched over and over is, where do you see people really develop well? And it's in generous environments. When you're like, and I just like, even just thinking of parenting and stuff, like, you don't treat all your kids the same. Like, you don't have the same success, or maybe you shouldn't, but maybe some people do. um, but there's, you sort of look at the individual, and then work with each person's capacity, and we figure out, like, what is success, and we create the conditions to support you and your gifts. I had a lot of conversations with my mom and all of her, like, super amazing friends about, like, what's the meaning of life? For many, many years, what's it all about? Why are we here? And the thing that I kept watching is, like, when you're in a place where people are lifting you up and being kind to you, you're generally kinder to yourself. And you may show up a little bit more as your full self when you're in a more generous environment. But when you're in, like, unsafe places, which a lot of business environments are, and you're being judged, and there's, like, a standard that you're supposed to be hitting that is, like, not created for you. It's created on a bar. We show up smaller, we stay a bit smaller. And so it's a challenge. It's a very different values orientation, right? If you walked into a place and you knew that you're going to be warmly embraced for exactly who you are, you would just be, like, so much happier as a human. And so it started with that kind of concept. And what if we just share generously what we have in abundance? For me, I have a ton of connections. So I share my connections all the time. If someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn, they want an intro to someone I'm connected to, I'm like, you got it. All those people owe me a favor. No problem. I'm going to cash in. And I share that. Like, I'm just not precious about that. I just feel like we're all here to give up our gifts. It's a responsibility for all of us. So that's kind of the underlying piece. And, we started with a very small financial contribution to kind of make that possible. And once it aggregates up, you start to really see the power of the collective to do that. And so that's the number one thing. And it's like another one of those mindset shifts, because we're living in a world where there aren't a lot of power words for things like kindness, right? Like, I imagined in my childhood, which was, like, extremely competitive. I had a brother in the NHL, and, like, just, like, a super competitive family. And if I walked in at the end of the day and went, I was so kind today, I was so generous and nice, what? like hammer, hammer, and so it's very counter to the narrative.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's like an unlearning.
Mm.
But when we start to do that with ourselves, then we're generally happier, less stressed, kinder to ourselves and to others. And it just really creates a very different spirit. And so we often hear people who come into this community like, wow, I just like signed up and put, activator on LinkedIn. And all these people started reaching out to me saying, what do you need help with? And I'm like, what's happening here? I'm like, yeah, this is what's possible if you just reorganize your resources a little bit.
I love the focus that you have, and you've been talking about kind of community and safe space, and how people can show up in this environment and feel like their whole selves, which is really important, especially for women and their confidence in business or in spaces. I mean, myself, I have often been the only woman in a in a bondholders meeting, or like something like that, where you're just completely alone, and trying to fit in, and make it the space where you can show up. The other thing I think that's really interesting is when we're talking about the generosity and kindness, and I think what you're doing at Coralus is not just being nice, not just being like, oh, you provide that safe in envelope or enveloping space, but you're also being generous in a way that can create wealth and create investment and create real tangible changes in the lives of the women who are, creating businesses, or donating, or being activators as well. Not everybody that's involved in the community is running a business. Some are trying to, repay back, or share back their learning, or share their knowledge. So this space of generosity is really, looking at creating some tangible things as well. It's not just, oh, we're just nice people and we just get together and, have tea. That, there's an aspect there, but you're really trying to create a new model of how women can be invested in their businesses, and show up in that space.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, we're wildly ambitious, right? Like we want to create a new economic model. That's what we're here
Yeah.
to do. And
Yeah.
we've demonstrated that you can create very different conditions for businesses to thrive by reorganizing assets that are already out there. Like the only thing that we really are valuing these days is money, right? But the the value of my connections, my emotional support, my influence, and all the other pieces that I can add in, my navigational capital. I'm like kind of a master at finding money from what I would call the old world and using it to create the new world while still delivering on the old world outcomes, but like over
Mhm.
surpassing them to create new. Like there's all kinds of skills that each of us have that when we add them together, it eases the journey for the next coming along with the goal of creating new systems.
Mhm.
Right? We're not trying to tear down systems. They're going to they'll figure it out themselves. The seeds of evolution are planted in each of us. And so we are going to evolve this model because it's not working for the
Mhm.
world. It's not working for anybody. And so, except for the 5 gazillionaires, but I don't think it's even working for them. So, it is a moment of transition. We're in this time where, like, I wrote this thing in 2014. Everything's broken. What a great time to be alive. And that's the spirit here, right? Where like there's so many things to be tweaked and massively transformed. And you need to do that in a community. You can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
And so this community approach is like, there's no such thing as a solo entrepreneur as far as I'm concerned. Nobody does anything on their own. It's a bit of a narrative, and that makes you feel isolated and small. And that's why you can't do, what you want. When you get into community, it just changes the conditions for success.
Mm. Yeah. Well, we speaking of, changing the world, radical generosity, community. So Coralus is operating globally. You have operations in different places. Can you maybe touch on that a little bit, of kind of what's happening internationally? And then I'm kind of curious if things are happening in different parts of the world, obviously differently, and if that's had any impact back here on your thinking for Coralus Canada.
Yeah, I mean, so many things. We're just constantly learning here. So we're operating in 5 countries: Canada, the US, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. And we're about to open up globally. So that'll be a new thing that we're now, I guess I just announced it. Anyway, talking about that in May at our Unsummit that's coming up in Vancouver. We started with this model, and then almost immediately, like I think on the first day that our website went up, we started in Canada. India was like, when are you coming here? And ding, ding, ding. And then we had like 70 countries lined up. But like some of the structures of how you roll out globally are really challenging, the regulatory environment for money exchange, et cetera. And so we added a country a year for 5 years. And then COVID slowed a lot of things down. And so we're now finding our way for how we go global. But one of the things that was early days when I first went to New Zealand, I was welcomed into the room for this special event from Maori elders. We'd already been like noticing that from folks that had told us that our model was not totally dissimilar from a potlatch or a more indigenous economy where capital was always kept in flow. It's not meant to be held onto from individuals. It's always meant to be flowing for the benefit of all. And so we started to really understand, I started to become much more of a student of different First Nations cultures around the world. And that I think it's about 18% of our portfolio right now are Indigenous-led businesses, which is like an unheard of statistic in any kind of like portfolio. Because these worldviews of folks that have been around for 60,000 years, Aboriginals in Australia, they understand how to operate in sustainable manners, in fluidity with nature. And as we're looking for the new models that help us get to that better world, there's a lot of wisdom in Indigenous culture that we pay attention to. So that's one example that's had a very significant influence on us.
That's so interesting, and I've had the chance. I get to know a few of your companies that you're working with, and especially for Indigenous women, accessing capital. We know from our own work and our own research, if you are a person of color, if you're a Black woman or an Indigenous woman, probably like 0.3% of VC investment is headed your way, and most businesses are financed through friends and family and those kinds of things. But to get the scale or to get the resources to really kind of grow, it takes a lot of people to come around and to make folks feel comfortable, also that they're not being taken advantage of, because there are a lot of economic systems and financial situations that end up in difficult. Indigenous and other diverse women founders and end up in situations that are not to their advantage. So I really appreciate that you've been taking a look at some of the different models and ways coming from Indigenous cultures and other cultures around the world, and bringing that back to us here in Canada so we can learn and think and explore just new ways of thinking and doing. What have been some companies and businesses that you have worked with? You mentioned some of the 18% of your portfolio is Indigenous women, which is fantastic. I got to say, I was like, wow, like that is a very high number, at least from what I see. I'm sure there's a bunch of banks and other VCs that are out there that would love to have that number, but you keep going with what you're doing. It seems to be working. But for our listeners, what would be some kinds of companies that you've seen come through that have been successful, or were maybe facing some challenges that Coralus was able to help them with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. A lot of people come to us and they're like, "Oh, perfect timing! I have 2 months of runway left." Or things are really challenging, and no matter where you are, I think walking into a supportive community is always a perfect time. It's always the perfect timing. And so, for whatever reason, the first one that's coming to mind right now is Better Packaging, which is out of New Zealand, and they create home compostable courier packaging. So if you just think of all of our Amazon packages and like just throw them into landfill, everything goes to landfill. None of it is recycled, which is a complete nightmare. And that's gotten so much worse over time. And so they are currently paying folks who are in impoverished communities to clear the plastic pollution out of the rivers and waterways in their community before it gets into the ocean. And they use it as the raw material to make home compostable courier packaging. So as they scale their business, they're literally healing the planet. And, the dominant narrative out there is, oh, why are you adding that complication to your business model? Just go use raw material to make your packaging. But they're like literally healing and cleaning up the environment as part of their business model. So genius. Like that's the kind of stuff we just are like, whoa, that's so amazing. Why is everyone doing that? And that's been a journey too, because they started with using like normally sort of like raw materials to make that. And then they realized, oh, we can go deeper and clean up pollution while we're doing this. So it's a journey for many of the ventures in our community. They have an intention. And then as people in our community learn how to do net zero, how to pay living wages, how to innovate in their human resources models, that gets spread across the community, which is really fun. So there's like this constant open sharing. Nobody's a competitor. We're on the same team. Another person is Chenny from gotcare.ca, and she's pioneering new ways of delivering rural healthcare, which is incredibly expensive and really challenging. And she does this, I love this, by paying 30% more to the healthcare providers and charging 30% less to the recipients of that support. And like, this is a business model that actually works. And it's just 30,000 healthcare workers on her platform at a time where it's like impossible for people to find healthcare work by just paying them better. And then giving them flex work. So they come in as kind of like, can you hear patients in your region? How many can you do in a day? And they do this matching with technology to allow for flex delivery of healthcare at a great wage. Simple changes. And, we see a lot of the things that we see that are really powerful in our community are process innovations, not just product innovations. And so like a lot of things are designed in a certain way because we want to make more money. And in our community, we're looking for people that actually want to solve challenges and redesign things to be more human oriented. And so we have a company called Ananda, which this is like a little complicated, amazing science. But she can take a piece of your skin, enervate the skin is what they call, put it in a petri dish, and then test if a drug is going to work on you very specifically, personally. And she came up with this idea because you can't biopsy the brain or the spinal cord. And she was trying to solve for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And so we still are testing this out on mice, which don't have the same system as us. And so we've solved Alzheimer's apparently over and over in mice, but it doesn't work in people. And so she's got a way to actually test this out. But the marketplace wants to make money from people's disease, not cure the disease. So all of the research and innovation goes into how do we make money off your disease instead of how do we cure it? And we're here working with her, and it's been wild to watch her journey because she just has all of this solution there and the inertia in the system to change in order to allow for that solution to happen when the machine just wants more.
Yeah.
How do we make money? So I get often we're just swimming upstream all the time with a lot of the ventures in our community, but doing that together in a community and watching what's working for you, what doors are open, who are the new allies for change, and share what's working versus do what I hear almost everywhere I go is I think everyone has a PhD in what isn't working. I'll sit there all day long and talk about all the crap that's broken in the barriers. Oh, you think that barrier is bad? I got one that's 10 times worse. Dinner parties just devolve down the terrain. And so we are really working on this muscle of what's working.
Yeah.
What is happening. And so trying to stay in that zone because it's really energizing.
Yeah. I could hear the passion in your voice as you were talking about the companies. And I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to talk. I mean, I feel like you told me about so many things that you were interested in and excited about. But I know you mentioned you have the unconference coming up and a few things. What are some things that you're excited about at Coralus that you want folks to know about and that we can share as well?
We're a brand based on transformation. So we're changing everything every year. I just got off another new website, which we seem to do almost every year that we're working on because we're just constantly transforming based on what's going on in the world. Right. So, and we try things out. We're not precious about it's in my DNA from my family. We're just constantly trying new things and, hey, this isn't working. Let's try this and see how it goes. And so what's coming up is we're going to be, we have a whole bunch, we're doing a massive update on our model. This going global. We're going to get people into small groups. And the idea is we've really learned that when you get into a small group with 6 or 7 other folks and you stick with that for a period of time, you start to see the power of the collective in supporting you. Keep sharing what you're working on. And the more that you share that, there seems to be magic in the small groups that you get in where people make introductions or even just being witnessed and held for that intention that you're putting out in the world. Like I have so many, I can show you my walls right now. They're just full of stickies of people's dreams. I want to, we want to have an LOI by the end of the year for $2 million with whatever. And I just stick it all up there like it's the manifesting wall. And we've really learned that when you have a lot of people kind of like working with you and weaving our resources together to support each other's dreams, it's so much more fun. And it feels kind of like abundant. Whereas if you sit by yourself and you don't tell anyone what you're doing and you're not asking for help from anywhere, you just like have this narrative of aloneness. And it's challenging, right? And this is a whole thing to unwind. Oh my God. For me anyway, like I just was like, oh, I'm not quite ready to ask her yet. She looks like she's got it all figured out. And the reality is when you're clueless, that's when you need to step into community and ask. Because there's just so much wealth there, right, to support you. So this small group thing is an unwinding and an unlearning for most people, and it will blow your mind if you can walk yourself across the threshold and just let yourself go. Okay, I know I'm not really ready. I'm just going to trust it'll be okay, and I'm not going to be judged. I can do it. When we see people do that, it's really exciting. And then we're going to be expanding the size of our community and our financial resources. We're going out and doing a bit of a raise because we're going to start to do follow-on investing in our ventures as well, in a way that is regenerative for the whole community. So not for 3 people to go make a ton of more money themselves, but to use this community capital to really innovate on new community ownership models, et cetera. So there'll be a new sort of call out to ventures as well, which we're excited about.
Okay. Well, I love both of those things. So, if folks want to learn more about Coralus or get in touch with you or become an activator, what's the best way that folks can connect with your community?
So go to coralus.world and become an activator, or join our mailing list and hear what's going on. Join local events that are happening near you. We have about 60 or 70 events happening every quarter. So you can find things in your local community or online to learn more and be part of this. And just, go onto LinkedIn and search at Coralus for activators, or just look for who is on our team. And there are thousands of folks out there, and ask them what the experience is like for them. Is this something for me? Does it feel right? And if you're asking the question, the answer is yes. It is for you if you feel any resonance with what we're doing. But, at the end of the day, I think we've been really sold a bill of goods that you need to figure out how to do things on your own and you need to have it all figured out. And it's just absolutely not true. You have to learn how to delete that part of your brain. And that's a practice, essentially, to believe that you're enough, that you can figure things out, that others want to support you. And the more you sort of step into that belief, the more you'll just kind of see this magic road open in front of you with lots more possibilities. And it really expands who you can be in the world. That's what it's all about for us.
Oh, I love that. So everyone who's listening, we figured out how we can connect with Coralus, but I think the message that I'm leaving with is take a leap of faith, ask for help, and don't go it alone. And for anyone who's out there who's an investor or potentially activator, stay tuned, because there'll be some interesting places such as Coralus that might be a great place to put some investment in. So that's really fantastic. Well, Vicki, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Onside podcast. As I mentioned, we're doing this feature through the Start Now Incubator, which has generously been supported through the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy. And we're really looking to highlight exciting, interesting women who are trying to make a huge difference around innovation and entrepreneurship here in Canada. And I definitely think that you are right up there, and we really are excited about all the work that you're doing. For our listeners who are here, I would say please like and subscribe to our podcast if you're interested in any programming from the Start Now Incubator. Our website is startnowincubator.ca, and for Onside, it's onsidenow.ca. So please take a listen, and we'll hope to have you guys back for our next episode. So thanks so much.